Good morning, everyone. My name is Asha Aiello, and I'm the WorkReady Program Director for the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited to be here today with Thea Enos. She is the owner and proprietor of a very cool store in the downtown historic Gresham area called Shop Girl Consignment. Thea, you want to tell you a little bit about yourself and how you got to what you're doing?
Absolutely. It's actually sort of a long story, but I'll save some of it for the later questions. So I'm coming up on 3 years of owning this store, which is very exciting. And we sell women's consignment, women and girls, clothing and accessories and all that sort of stuff. My background, though, is not in retail. When I was a teenager, I worked a little bit in retail at an auto parts store, but then I went on to college and graduate school, got a job for 20 years in higher education, working at a local college. But this has always been a dream of mine. So hopefully we'll get to hit on that a little bit later because it started when I was a teen, which seems really relevant for our audience today.
Most definitely. Yeah, actually, go ahead and hit on that now. That's a great kind of segue into the question. So you said it's been a dream of yours since you were a teen, and clearly you had a long-term career in higher education. So what kind of sparked that dream?
Totally. Well, my mom was always really good at helping us school shop in that she would give us a set amount of money and then say, you can get whatever you want within this amount, this budget, which was really a great teacher for me in shopping frugal and finding things secondhand. And so I found this cute little consignment shop in my hometown's downtown on our cute little main street and shopped there and loved the treasure hunt, loved finding bargains and, these really unique pieces. And I remember thinking at that time, I would love to have my own consignment shop someday. But my personality is not one that's like a ground up entrepreneur. I don't just have the wherewithal to just start a business. And so I never really considered it a possibility. It just seemed like a really fun thing. Went on and kind of did the traditional path of 4 years of college, 2 years of a graduate degree, found a job in higher education that I loved. I loved teaching. I was an adjunct professor and I was the director of advising. And it was very meaningful work. I'm very happy that I had all of that. But in 2016, I decided to leave that and be home with my son. Was home for about a year and a half and starting to get the itch to go back to working. And I had started shopping at this exact consignment shop just a little while before. So I was on the email list and they sent out an email that said, well, we have to close unless we can find a buyer. And the first time I saw that, it was like, oh, that's too bad. I hope they find a buyer. And then the second time I saw it, I thought, hold on, this has been a dream of mine since I was a teenager. Could that actually happen? And less than a month later, I wrote them a check and bought the shop.
Wow.
So, and then about 2 months later, I opened it as mine. And it has been even better than I ever imagined it would be. I thought it would just be fun to be around cool clothes and, working with people, but instead it's like really deeply meaningful. It's got the environmental impact. It's got the relationship building of repeated customers and consigners. It's not like working at a large retail where you maybe, see people once. So anyway, that's how it all came to be. And here I am, made it through the pandemic, have a wonderful employee, and we're having a blast. It's amazing.
That's exciting. And a couple of things I want to pull out there. One,
this is my wonderful employee.
Hello. The couple things I want to pull out. One is that you didn't consider yourself a typical entrepreneur. Like I think I've held admiration all my life for people that are like, I'm going to go start a business, and they just kind of do it, or they, start up, have some idea on, if they're specifically crafty and they get on Etsy and they're selling handmade things. Or I have a friend who sells absolutely gorgeous feather jewelry and like handcrafted jewelry. And I've just never been one of those people, and which is okay. We need all kinds of people in the world. And
right.
So I think it's important to hear that, like, you don't have to think of yourself any certain way, right, to be successful. You can
absolutely
take a step in a direction that seems scary, but definitely, I'm so glad it's worked out for you, especially coming through the pandemic. Will you explain, because I wasn't even familiar with this until I was an adult, actually, or, whenever I get to that stage, what consignment is?
Absolutely. So consignment is resale, meaning we're taking clothes that other people have already owned and we are selling them again. But it's a pretty significant step up from thrifting because we are very particular about quality and condition. And that may not be true at all consignment places, but that's really important to us. What I'm looking for is not necessarily a top name brand. We do get some high end name brands here, but I love getting stuff from Target that's just still in really good condition. And the reason I love that is so that anybody can find something here within their price range and that suits their style and all of that. So our consigners bring us clothing, and we put it out on the floor with a price tag. And if that item sells, then our consigner gets a percentage of the sale and we get the other part of it. So we're sharing the sale with our consigners, and they're just Gresham people. They're not anyone in particularly special, other than they've got clothes that they'd like to consign because they're nice enough for this kind of setting.
How cool to be in charge of it, to be, to buy the shop and then to get to really design it. I would imagine that artistically that had to be a lot of fun, right? Designing your, the way that the layout is and how you style mannequins. And, those are things that I worked for 3 years as a marketing manager at Cabela's. And of course we had our style pages, right? We got everything from corporate. And then it was like, okay, I've dressed more mannequins than I just care to discuss, and probably disarticulated a few by accident, and fought with them. And so, how much fun to design your own and seasonality. And I'm imagining all of that is probably like, even if you didn't have a big creative streak, you could probably get pretty inspired.
Yes, absolutely. My employee, Jen, is especially good at merchandising, which is a term I've just learned in the last 3 years, which is where we place items and what they look like to attract attention. But before that, I had this place for 1.5 years on my own, and it is super fun. It is a great opportunity for creativity, and just making it my own. When I originally bought the shop, they were selling it with all the stuff included, the artwork and the racks and the cabinets and all of that. And I decided that I didn't want any of their things. I wanted to start over on my own. And so I was able to negotiate the price down, which is important if you're going to be buying something like this. But also then I was able to completely be free to create on my own. So yeah, it's been a blast.
What motivates you? You talked a little bit about this is your dream, and which is wonderful, but I think a couple of things that I think might be interesting to hear is what motivates you. And you said one of them was, it's eco-friendly actually, and then also, community. So what motivates you about what you do?
Well, first of all, the environmental impact is really significant. And I'll be honest, that wasn't on my mind when I was a teenager, because that was before climate change was a big deal. I mean, you may not be able to tell, but I was a teenager a long time ago. And so climate change wasn't on our radar in the same way. I was just looking for the treasure and the bargain. But since that time, of course, I've learned just what an impact fast fashion in particular, the kind of stuff you get at Rue 21, Forever 21, even to a certain degree, Target, Fred Meyer, Walmart, those kinds of places that are really inexpensive, but they still have the same environmental impact as the higher end clothes, but cost less. And so they do in some ways even more damage. For example, it takes about 1,400 gallons of water to produce one pair of jeans. We don't use anywhere near that amount of water in the number of showers we take over an entire year. So if you can imagine all the showers you take, the baths, the water you run when you brush your teeth, which you hopefully turn off, washing the dishes, whatever it is. And if you can imagine that multiplied a few different times, and then you think about the one pair of jeans you're wearing, that's a lot of environmental impact. And so when you're buying them secondhand, then you're supporting an industry of, instead of buying something brand new that had to be made to meet demand, you are buying something that already exists. And so you are saving in that way, creating more demand for things that already are, rather than demand for things that need to be new. I hope that makes sense.
Very much.
So yeah, the other thing is, of course, a lot of clothing, particularly from fast fashion, falls apart really quickly. They get holes in the seams, or they get pilly where they've got those little, balls of fabric all over them and things like that. That stuff isn't even good enough to give to a thrift store. So it ends up going in our landfills. Clothing does not break down very well in our landfills. So when you shop consignment, but even thrifting, if you shop resale and you are attentive to the brands that you're buying that'll be higher quality and last a little longer, then you can give that garment longer life, wear it longer, it will last longer for you, and not have it turn over into a landfill and just fill up, the way that we've done so unfortunately over the years. So those are a couple of things about the environmental impact that really matter to me. I also want to share how important it is to me to be a member of the community of Gresham, because it is, it's, I think the third largest city in Oregon, between third and fifth. I can't remember exactly where it's at.
Yeah, it's right in there. I know for a while it was the third largest, and then like Bend took off. So yeah,
Oh
somewhere
yeah, true. Bend, Pendleton, those kinds of places. But it is still very small town feel. And I know that for lots of you, if you are a teenager growing up here in Gresham, you might feel like it has this bad reputation. You might even contribute to calling it, its bad reputation or whatever. But I have to tell you, there are people in the city of Gresham who are constantly working to make it a better place. And I just participated last night in a town hall about Menstrual Dignity Act, which is being led by our own state representative, Ricky Ruiz. And the ways that the city of Gresham and the employees of the city of Gresham, including Asha and many others, for the chamber, are every day accessible to us and working for the betterment of this town means that we can actually make change as an individual person. You can actually participate in things that do matter. Unlike, honestly, Portland, where I lived for 24 years before moving out to Gresham. I lived in outer Southeast. And in Portland, it's pretty anonymous. It's very hard to break into systems that you can help create change. So being out here in Gresham also really inspires me, honestly. It's pretty amazing that I get to do what I love to do while also being in a place where I can participate and help make things better.
What's interesting to me is I think for all of I've networked in East County since literally the beginning of my career. It is very, for all intents and purposes, very small. Like it's a very much community based, and how that relates to business and career relation is that when you're shopping local with somebody like yourself, you are just as often, like you could run into Mayor Stovall in the Fred Meyers, right? Like if you're grocery shopping with your family, or
Yes.
there is no kind of the odds that I'm going to run into Ted Wheeler are pretty low. Or any of the city commissioners. But
Right.
in Gresham, you really, like, you could be picking up Panera or Sunny Hans, and the next thing you know, like, you're in there next to a city council person. And it's not a city council person where there's separation. They're most likely to ask you how you're doing, or something along those lines. And that's one thing I very much do enjoy about there. Plus, I think, as you explore entrepreneurship too, the more community members that the better off you are, right? Everybody's different in how they run their business, and everybody's usually it is a community. And so if you learn and can grow within the community, even if you want out eventually, if you're like, I'm just not, Oregon isn't my place, I'd like to try something else. Yeah, definitely. But it's nice to know where you come from and kind of supporting that local model. Somebody had to raise you.
Yeah, it's right. Exactly. To that point, Asha, I remember early on you and I talking about the importance of shopping local. And so I'm glad you raised that because it is important. The other problem, of course, of fast fashion and big boxes is that the money has a larger corporate headquarters. But honestly, the worst place to shop is through places like Amazon and other large corporate online companies. I'm not dogging them. They have their place and they've definitely provided convenience for a lot of people, particularly during the last year. But when you shop at my shop, statistics show that 78% of that money stays in Gresham. When you shop at a big box store here in Gresham, they still employ local people. And so you're still contributing in a positive way to the economy. So whether it's Fred Meyer or Office Depot or Target or any of the corporate stores, you're still contributing to our local economy. I think it's 43% of the money stays here in Gresham. So shopping face to face with people wherever you are is always going to help that local economy more than any online shopping you could do, unless of course you are shopping through someplace like Etsy. And even then, being careful about where is this item coming from. Um, but you are contributing to that individual person's economy. Like Asha said, people who sell their own crafts and things like that. That's awesome. But really the best way to shop is face-to-face local, if it matters to keep money in the community.
I think to that point too, again, coming back to the whole point of these virtuals, right, is exploring careers and exploring community, exploring careers and what that's doing. You can't, it's hard to have a career if there's nobody around there that's working or nobody has a shop front, right? So that was one thing that even in my small town, I grew up in a very small town in Southern Oregon, that if you don't invest, maybe if somebody's got to give you a part-time job, and that might be the Fred Meyers, but it also might be someone like yourself when it's like, hey, I don't have time for a full-time clerk, but gosh, I'd love to have somebody part-time. And that's the same thing with when I ran the Summer Works program, is I encountered a lot of small businesses that loved having interns because it added some help to them, but they couldn't necessarily always afford to pay a full-time employee. But as that business grows, that changes, yes, right? And by shopping in the community, that means that, you're helping somebody not only local, but there's a chance that you might get a job out of it and or a career. I talked to Tim Bruner 2 weeks ago, who's a local architect and in design group, and he was all over the fact. He's like, I'd love for students to call me or pick my brain. He's like, that's what we're here for. He's like, obviously we're here to design buildings, but he's like, I'd love for people to do that. And the more the more, I discussed with a woman from Boeing 2 days ago, and she's like, mentors and sponsors and people that helped me, mentorship was huge. And again, you'll find that in your local community. So you mentioned that, you chose college and then a graduate degree, but to do what you do or even just be an entrepreneur, what kind of experience would you recommend or education?
Thankfully, there are a lot of non-college resources that are available to people, like the Small Business Administration Development Centers. There's one out here in Gresham on Stark and 197th. And that's a free resource provided by the Small Business Administration where you can go in and set up appointments with their advisors and get some great help. I love to tell the story of my brother and me, because my brother, who's 2.5 years older, is a typical entrepreneur. And he knew early on that he was not built to work for somebody else. And so he did the traditional of going to a couple years of community college, but he'd always struggled with traditional school and always felt out of place there. And so he started out, honestly, because he had some computer savvy, he started out letting go of college and helping people who needed tech support. This was back in the mid-90s. And then getting slowly paid for that, and then slowly building. And he had this vision, but now he owns a multi-million-dollar tech company in Colorado that has been thriving for 15 years. He got invited to do a fellowship at a local school there. And then they wanted to know what his college background was. And the fact that he didn't have a bachelor degree meant that they were like, oh, well, we can't really have you teaching then. But he doesn't have a bachelor's degree. He doesn't have a master's degree. And he's done a fantastic job of self-teaching and learning on his own. So the traditional route isn't required for everybody. However, I will say that a true entrepreneur like my brother is a rare individual. Most of us don't have that kind of gumption, that kind of willingness to fail and get back up. It's too scary, which is completely understandable. So having a college degree is a great platform to just move from. It gives you some freedom. But it doesn't have to be for everybody. And I worked for 20 years in higher ed. I fully support that a college degree is not necessary for everyone. And tech degrees are fantastic. And there are lots of different avenues. And for that matter, because I worked for 20 years in higher ed, I'm also somebody who can answer questions about college. If you want a completely low risk, low investment level kind of conversation, I'd love to talk to high school students about what are called CLEP exams and things like that. So You can also tap the brains of small business owners just about life, and you might be surprised at what we know and what we can tell you.
I think a lot of the what I've learned over the doing these, but just within the chamber, is that you don't have to go anywhere traditionally. You can baby step it, but the common theme is lifelong learning. So
Yes.
you don't have to be super, successful or go to college like right out of the gate. It's like it's okay to take baby steps as long as you're moving forward. But most importantly, that you're not opposed to learning. When I talked to the gentleman from Subaru, there were three. They were like, "Hey, I don't know everything." They're like, and we appreciate people with experience that come in and want to work in a warehouse environment. But gosh, one of the key things is always being willing to learn and
Yeah.
or seeking out that learning, even if that's just a certificate program, or like you said, going to the Small Business Administration or asking a community member like yourself, say, this sounds really cool, but I have no idea where to start. And that was me going to college the first time. I had no idea where to start.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
scary.
A lot of kids out here in Gresham are first generation college students, which means they don't have their parents to answer the questions that they have about how you do all of this. And I would never want that to slow somebody down, because there are so many people, whether it's at the colleges or at the high schools or even, like I said, in the community, who can answer those questions, and completely non-threateningly, because we genuinely just want to help on whatever the best path is for a person.
What skills, and we've covered this a little bit, like we've talked about lifelong learning and then being flexible, but then also having a platform, but what skills and attributes would make somebody successful in owning their own business?
I think willingness to delegate. I don't do my own bookkeeping. I wanted to. It felt like it's something I should do, but I have a fantastic bookkeeper. But more importantly, I think owning your own business. Wow. I still kind of feel like a backdoor entrepreneur. I still don't feel like I'm necessarily a great example of somebody who, but I don't know why. I'm sorry. I'm having sort of an existential conversation out loud here. A book that my brother recommended to me, which I thought was really helpful, was, I think, called The Entrepreneur's Dilemma. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the
Sounds
point
familiar.
the point was that entrepreneurs tend to start out doing everything themselves, and we just get used to that. But we're not sustainers. We are not maintenance people. We are starter people. And so after a while, when the business is doing well and you're at maintenance level, you might get burnt out, because that's not your skill and gifting. And that's where you're going to need support from other people who do sustaining and maintenance, and the daily tasks, so that you can keep starting. But you have to be willing to let it go to someone who you trust, so that you can work on what you're good at and somebody else can do what they're good at. And not expect yourself to be good at everything, because we're not. And that's why every person has their own gifts and abilities. I think that might be the key, is recognizing where our limits are and allowing other people to come in and support to take those limits out, and take things farther.
I know when I was a teenager, I felt like I should be able to do it all. And I think we ask more even, after years later, I think we ask more of our students 20 years later than I graduated high school.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We're asking much, much more of them now. And I think that it should be heard that, you don't have to do it all, and it's totally okay. It's okay to not be the best in the room at everything, but it is totally okay to ask the questions. I know when I used to work with youth in the Summer Works program, a lot of times asking questions is really hard. And I feel like that's something that we definitely need to broadcast. Asking questions is totally fine. It's okay to not know everything. And it's hard. It's very hard to ask questions. I'm an adult and I still have a hard time being like, oh, I have to admit that I don't know that crap. Right. So asking questions of others and recognizing your limitations, but also recognizing your strengths. We don't often do a good job of letting ourselves shine.
Right.
It's okay to have your gifts and abilities, and it's okay to do that. And it's okay at 16 not to know what those are either. Like,
oh my gosh, yes.
Part of life is just exploring. And one thing I want people to hear, especially with, someone such as yourself that's creative and energetic, it's okay to have found those gifts along the way as you're making that transition. So looking back, this is the last point, and you can answer that too, but the best piece of advice for a student looking to start their own business.
I should have a ready answer for this.
It's not an
The
easy
best
question.
advice. First of all, believe. Interestingly, my brother and my dad thought I should not buy this shop. And it was really hard to continue forward with that discouragement. They both just thought it wasn't going to work out. And they're very knowledgeable businessmen. And so that was very hard to go against that. So instead, I gave myself the ability to say, I'm going to try this. Maybe that's the advice. I'm going to try this. It isn't all or nothing. If this doesn't work out, I can do something else. And I know sometimes people say, don't give yourself an out because then you'll take it. I disagree with that, because we need to know that there are options, and that something not working out, I could own this for 10 years and then for some reason, maybe another pandemic hits and it has to close. But I'll be okay. And I will find something else. And because I've networked in the community, I'll have lots of great people to turn to for support. So yeah, I think that's what I would say is know that it's never, I just used an absolute term. It's never, it's not all or nothing. And believe in it and gather your supporters and do your best. And it's okay if it doesn't work out that time. Something else will.
And taking chances. It's okay to take a chance on something and try something new and step outside your zone, especially if you've been doing something new for a long time. When I went to work for Cabela's, I had marketing experience but what I didn't have was any retail experience. So that was a whole new world for me, and it was scary, but man, it was so fun. I'm so glad I had a chance to do something different and experience something different. So
yes.
Thea, I want to respect your time. I know we had kind of a shorter time limit. I just thank you so much. And I don't know if you want to tell people the address of your store so that people can come visit. Definitely, of course, absolutely. But yeah, so Thea Enos is the owner of Shop Girl Consignment, and that is located where?
111 North Main Avenue. So we're on Main Street in downtown, right next to Sugar Cubed and the Cool Barbershop. And we're also online, shopgirlconsignment.com. Jen and I both love to play dress up with people. So if anybody just wants to come in and try on fun stuff, we have beautiful dresses. We have fun summer stuff. Come on in. We love doing that.
All right, Thea, thank you. I hope you have an excellent weekend.
Thanks, Sasha. You too. Bye.